Hey everybody, Heather here. So today we're going to be watercoloring this cute Whimsy stamps image, and her name's Ruby. And if you'd like to see if this kit is still available, head over to the store, and there's a link down in the description box. And just type in Ruby in the little search bar at the top of the store, and if it's available, it will pop up. If not, check out some of the other kits while you're there. So I've already stamped my girl on Canson 140-pound Montball watercolor paper with Ranger Archival Jet Black ink. So let's color. So for supplies today, I'm going to use my Zig Detail and medium brush, and I've got my Tim Holtz ink palette here full of my ink. I've also got my crusty paper towel that I'm going to wipe my my 8-in water brush off on, and then in case I'm going to mix paints, I have my piece of acetate that's taped to a piece of cardstock so I can see the color on top of it. And so to start, I'm going to use my medium brush because I'm going to outline my whole image with antique linen, and I'm going to do the outlining first so that I don't accidentally. There's lots of, these flowers are going to be red and I don't want to touch them on accident. So we're going to outline first. That will avoid touching anything extra. Okay, so I've given my brush a squeeze and I've touched it to the back of my hand to see how wet it is. And since I'm going to outline, it's a little bit wetter than I would color with. That way it'll just spread a little bit easier. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my antique linen on my brush, and I'm going to start right down here underneath these flowers and bring it down to, in between that flower petal there, because we're going to put some color down on the ground for the ground too. And then my brush has ran out of ink, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the water in my brush to kind of spread that out here to the outside. And then I dab my brush off and I grab some more, and I'm just going to work my way clear around to the other side. And I try not to go too far. I don't want it to dry in between, so I want to make sure that it stays wet. So I wouldn't go all the way around my image before wiping it. Otherwise it'll be dry and it's not going to move very well. Okay, I'm going to dab my brush off again, grab new ink. And let's go up here in between her chin here and pull some color down this way. And then we'll just wipe that around up here. And when you lay it down at first, it's kind of a greenish color, but as it dilutes out, it turns this nice yellow color. Reminds me of candlelight. Okay, let's go up here, work our way up here. And my brush is running out of ink, so I'll wipe that off and come back with just my water and pull that line I put down out here into the background. I'll grab some more. And we're going to go right up here and connect my dots, wipe my excess ink off, come back with water, and brush that out here into the back. And that's still quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off again, and then come back with just water again and spread it out a little bit further. Okay, let's go down her braid. Whoops, I didn't get any. It helps if you put some ink on your brush. So I'm going to grab a little bit more ink. And sorry if you hear the dog wandering around in the background. I left my door open today because I'm actually babysitting Natalie and I'm trying to do the video while she's having her nap. My daughter got a job and she had to go to orientation, so last minute, Mom, can you watch Natalie? So she's having her mid-morning snooze, and I'm like, oh, I'll quickly run in and do try to whip out this video, because I know you guys, I put the card kit in the store last week, and you guys have been patiently waiting for me to get it done. And I also have Sonia, who's wanting to buy the card that I made originally, and I told her I would have to wait until after I did the video, because I kind of like to look at my card while I'm painting so that I can remember what I colored it. Alright, so we've made it all the way around to the bottom here. And then I'm going to let this side dry for a minute, and then we're going to color the ground. Okay, so for the ground, I'm going to use weathered wood today. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit on the bottom of my brush, and I haven't switched brushes. I still have the medium because that's still quite a big area. And I'm going to start by I'm going to start on this side just in case it didn't dry completely on the other side. That'll give it another second here to dry. And I'm just going to go right along those flowers and along the bottom of this boot. And then my brush is running out of ink, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off. And then I'm going to come in with just my water, and I'm going to feather that line further down onto the paper. And then when I get to the side, I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush again, and then come back and feather it even more so that that line blends out here to the bottom of the paper and turns to nothing. Okay, and let's go continue to the other side. So I'm going to grab a little bit more ink, and let's add a little bit over here, and we'll go around this boot, and then we'll wipe our brush off, and we'll come back with just water and feather that line out. Okay, and I've picked up a lot of ink on my brush, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off. We'll come back and feather that edge a little bit more. Okay, and this side over here is still looking a little light, so I'm going to give that another touch of color. Grab a little bit more ink, come over here and give that just a little bit more. And wipe that excess off and feather that bottom line. Okay, I'm liking how that looks. So let's go up here and we're going to work on her skin. And for skin, I'm going to start with Tattered Rose. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that. And because her face is such a big area, I'm going to still use my medium brush. And I'm actually going to start down here on her arms. She's got a little bit of arm showing, so I'm going to put a little bit there. And I'm going to put a little dab underneath of her neck and down the side of that little sleeve. And she's got a little tiny dab of shoulder showing over there. Then you wipe your excess ink off, and you come back with just your water on your brush and pull that ink down here into the rest of the white part of her skin. And that looks pretty good for a first coat. So let's go up here and we'll zoom in just a little bit there. So we'll grab a little bit more ink on my brush, and we're going to do her face. So I'm going to put my shadows on this side of her face over here. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of our Tattered Rose over here. And then she's got these little bangs that kind of swoop down on her forehead here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more color right there. And she's got her little ear poking out right here, so I'm going to touch that now that I've used up most of my ink. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to come back with just the water on my brush. I'm going to pull that ink down here into the middle of her face. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to pull some more so that I don't leave a harsh line there. But if you go and you start on this side and you work your way over here and then you come back, I'm not giving that line enough time to dry. And I've added just a little bit of color down here at the bottom of her face. Okay. So while I was coloring her face, her shoulders went ahead and dried, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more color there. Then go in here, just a little bit more. Darken that up just a little bit more. I'm going to do the same thing for her face. So I'm going to go ahead and grab me a little bit more on my brush. Come up here, and I think I'll put just more on this side this time because it's still pretty pink over here. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then we're going to come in with just my water and pull that ink down here into her face. Darken it up just a little bit more. Make it a little bit pinker. Okay, so I've given that a couple of minutes to dry, and now I'm going to add a little bit of mixed paint. And so for my mixed paint, I'm going to use Tattered Rose and tea dye. And since I use it all the time, I have it permanently mixed in one of my little wells in my ink palette. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab some of that onto, and I've switched brushes. I'm going to grab my detail brush. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my mixed paint onto my brush, and we're going to add that where we want some shadow. So I'm going to say right back here, and then I'm going to dab my brush off, And then I'm just going to work that over here so that it comes to nothing at this side. So it's way darker over here and it gets lighter over here. Then I'm going to grab me a little bit more and put some of that up here on her neck and down the sleeve. And then again dab my brush off and then come back and wipe that over towards the other side there. And let's do the same thing up here. So grab some fresh paint. And I'm going to add that right along the brow right here. I'm going to come in and spread that line towards the middle of her face. And let's also add some up here where her bangs are touching her face, and down here this way. And then dab your excess off and come back and brush that towards the middle of her face. And I think I'll add a little bit more over here. I'm going to come over here and add a little bit on her chin there. And then just brush that towards the middle a little bit more. Okay, I'm liking how that looks. So we're going to let that dry and then we'll add the cheek color. But while that's drying, let's go up here and add some walnut stain to her hair. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that. And I'm going to keep my detail brush this time so I can work on individual strands of hair. I grab some walnut stain on my brush. And I'm going to start back here on her little ponytail. And she's got a ponytail holder in her hair, so I'm not going to paint that. But I'm going to add just a little bit on the other side. And I think I'll work that up just a little bit more. And we're going to go right up here. My brush is running out, so that's perfect. I didn't have so much on my brush that it would be really dark the whole way, but it's darker down here and it gets way lighter over here. And we're going to add some, we'll leave that and let that dry, and we're going to go add some down here to this part of her hair. So let's go ahead and do this little section back here, and she's also got a headband on. So I'm going to avoid the headband. And come down in here. Maybe add a little bit. Okay, and I still have a lot of ink on my brush, so I'm going to go ahead and dab it off. And then come back with just my water and work that line down here clear across this other side on her hair. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this little curly Q right here too. So this little curly Q looks like it comes underneath this other little curly Q. So I'm going to go ahead and dab a little bit right up here towards the top. And then where it kind of looks like it dips back towards her ear, I'm going to add a little bit in there. Same with this one. And then this one comes way down here and dips back, so I'm going to add a little bit in there. And that's a pretty tiny area, so you want to be careful with your brush. And then I'm going to wipe my excess ink off. I'm going to come back with just water and lightly feather that line away. Okay, so let's go ahead and work our way up. So let's do this little section right here. So again, this little section looks like it comes out from behind this one, so I'm going to add a little bit of color in up there. I'm also going to dab a little bit down here close to this flower. And then I'm going to wipe that excess ink off and come back with just the water on my brush and pull that towards the middle of that area. And this one we're going to brush out here towards the edge. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we got up here towards the top. Let's do these bangs. So for her bangs, let's add a little bit of color back here in the back. And my brush is going to run out of ink because I didn't have too much on there, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue working those lines out here all the way across, but I don't want it to dry, so I'm going to come back and pull some more on those lines so that the edge doesn't have a chance to dry. Okay. Then let's see, let's work on another section. So this little section's underneath, so let's add a little bit right here. And here's a little section that's underneath. And this one, and my brush is going to run out of ink. So I'm going to go back up here to this one while it's running out and soften that edge with just this barely any ink on my brush. And this little piece right here actually goes underneath this one and then comes back out. So while my brush is fairly empty, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of that over here so it looks like it continues from over here and it's not too dark. Okay, so that leaves us with this little strand right here. So let's add a little bit up here. Let's add a little bit to this one and the back side of that. Oh, and I should have colored that the antique linen, so I'll fix that here in a minute. Okay. I got a little bit over the line there, so we'll just go ahead and brush that on that one. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of antique linen right there in between that space, because that's not hair, that's background right here. Okay, and let's go back here and grab this ponytail. So on her ponytail, she's also got right here, the wrapper from her hair goes through, but she's got a little section of hair right in between there, so I'm going to dab that. And then down here, this is part of her ponytail, so I'm going to go ahead and get that with a little bit darker because it's underneath, just to fill that in. Then I'm going to dab my brush off and I'm going to grab new ink, and I'm going to come up here and we're going to work on these ponytails up here. Okay, so she's got a little scrunchie in, and then she's got this hair that's going to come out of her scrunchie, so it's going to be darker. And I'm going to do this one a little bit darker right here at the top. And this one's coming out from underneath, so I'm going to give that a little bit of brush of dark. And then by now my brush is running out, so I'm going to wipe the rest of that ink off, and I'm going to come back with just water, and I'm going to spread that line down to the bottom of each of those sections of hair. Like so. Okay, then we're going to grab some more ink, and we're going to do the same thing with another strand. So here, this one's coming out from behind the flower. I'm going to go ahead and give that a dab, and I'm going to grab the end down here just a little bit, and this one's underneath, and then we got this one underneath, and my brush is running out of ink, so I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. And then start over with new ink. So dab your brush off, grab new ink, and I'm just picking strands of hair as I go. Okay, let's go down here, grab a little bit. Just work that ink around on that ponytail. She's got some great curls in there. Plus, by skipping down here to the bottom, I've given that little section a chance to dry. It was looking kind of wet. Okay, that looks pretty good for her first coat on her hair, so we're going to let that dry a second, but let's go up here and we'll work on her cheeks. So cheeks, let's go ahead and add some worn lipstick for her cheeks. So I'm going to grab a little dab of that on my brush, and let's do a little bit over here, and I think I'll refresh that, so I'm going to get some new, and I'll do a little bit, a little circle right here. And I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to just kind of feather my brush along the edge of that circle and just soften it a little bit. I picked up a piece of dirt. There. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. So while that's drying, let's go up here and add another coat to her hair. So I'm going to grab my walnut stain. And let's start down here underneath, right here first. And since that's underneath, I want it to be a little bit darker down here. So let's go ahead and darken that up. I'm going to darken some of this up. Just a tad bit more. Not too much, but just a little bit more. Okay, and we'll add a little bit more up here to some of these bangs too, because they're looking kind of bleached out at the end. Okay, let's carry that. Grab a little bit more for this middle one right here. Need my dark to come down just a tad bit more, I think. I'm okay with it being really light out here at the end. Okay, and let's do a little bit on this inside one. And here's an inside one. And let's darken this inside one up a little bit more. Okay, I'm liking how that front part's looking, so let's go ahead and add some more back here to this back. I'm going to go around her ponytail scrunchie, and I'm going to add a little bit more ink so we can pull some of that color further up. Okay, I'm liking that. And let's see what we can do with a couple of these little hair strands down here. Let's give it a little bit more definition by darkening just certain little parts up. So let's darken up that one. How about we darken up at this back one a little bit? Let's see, how about this one? I don't want to darken them all up, but I think I'll add, if you add a few more dark strands in there, it'll make it look like it's weaving and turning a little bit more. Let's darken this one up just a little bit more. And let's go down here at the bottom and maybe do a couple. How about this back one? And a little bit more color right here. And we got this one inside, so I'm going to add some more dark right there. That's looking pretty good. Glad. You just got to look at it and kind of decide where you want to have some dark streaks. I'm liking how that is, but I think I'll add a little bit more right here where it comes out of her ponytail and pull that down just a little bit more. Okay, I'm liking that overall look. Here I've bled out into this one just a little bit, so let's go ahead and grab a little bit of our color. Just darken that whole section up just a little bit more. I didn't let it dry, and when I colored this one over here, it kind of bled into the side. So for Tattered Rose, I want to soften her cheeks up a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and add my Tattered Rose over here on the side, because I want to lay it down where I want my shadow to be. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then we're just going to pull that color across her face over here to her other cheek. Dab my brush off, and I'm going to do it again. I just want to soften the edges of that cheek up there. That was looking a little too round and circly for me. Okay, that's a nice pink color. I'm liking that. Okay, so let's go down here and let's do, I guess we could do her shoes, because that's far enough away from everything. So let's grab our walnut stain to do our shoe. Okay, so for her shoe, a walnut stain, I'm going to start on the shoe right over here. And I'm going to put my walnut stain down here on her sole and underneath of her shoe, or where her pants are touching her shoe a little bit. Then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to use that ink to pull to the end of her boot. Same for her sole. We're just going to pull that ink down here towards the end. Okay, that's pretty good for a first coat. Okay, so I'll grab some more walnut stain, and we're going to do the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit on that side, and a little bit on this side. And then I'm going to wipe that excess off. I'm going to use that ink I laid down to pull into the middle. Okay, so while that is drying, let's go up here. Let's pick something that's further away. So let's do her sleeve, because it looks like I did that with some pumice stone. So let me grab a little bit of that, and I think I'll switch to my detail brush. So I'm going to grab a little bit of pumice stone, because we don't want to put too much on there, we just want to add a little bit of shadows. So I'm going to go along the back of her shirt, and I'm going to grab a couple of these little pleats she's got in there. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then I'm going to go in with my brush and just very lightly kind of swirl my brush around and pull just a little bit of that color up here into her sleeve, so it's not white anymore. It's going to be a little bit of that brown, but it's still going to be darker down here where the pleat comes down. Okay, so we're going to grab a little bit more, and we're going to do the same thing down here in the ruffle part. Put your ruffles in, and then wipe your excess ink off, and then go in and just lightly move that ink around on your ruffle. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit more. Okay, she's got just a little bitty bit of her sleeve showing right over here, so I'm going to put a little bit of my pumice stone right there, and then I'm just going to very lightly bring it over here to the other side. And that's all there was to those cute little sleeves. So now this down here, her shoes are dry, so I'm going to add another coat of walnut stain to my shoe. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that on my brush. I'm going to grab a little bit more. And same thing, I'm going to lay it down where I want to have some shadows. And my brush is running out of ink, so I'm going to go ahead and just go with how much I have on there, just so I can make her boots a little bit darker here at the end. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So grab some new ink and go ahead and put that in. Okay, and that's quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off and then pull that towards the center. Okay, that looks good. I like that. So now, let's see. Since we did her boots, we don't want to do her pants. And her shirt's probably just still drying a little bit. So let's go do these leaves up here. So for her leaves, there is Bundled Sage. So let me grab that ink palette. Or we could even go up here and do... Let's actually go up here and do this headband. So for that, we're going to use Evergreen Bough. So I'm going to grab some of that on my brush. And I'm going to start right here on this back one. So let's add a little bit in there and a little bit in the back. And if you have a lot, go ahead and wipe it off. And then just use that little bit to fill in the middle part. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the rest of the headband. So we'll grab a little bit more ink. And it's going to be darker on this bottom side, so I'm going to add a little bit more over here. And Dikia has come to visit to see what we're doing in here. I'm actually back. I had to take a break. Natalie woke up from her nap, so she's now taking her afternoon nap, and we're continuing on with our video. So I had plenty of drying time while I was off playing toys. Oh, and she's talking in there, so I guess that was her 5-minute nap. So let me finish up this headband, and then I will be back when she's done playing. Alright, so let's continue on with our coloring of our vest here. And we're still coloring with our evergreen bough. So I'm going to grab a little bit to my brush, and I want it to be a little bit darker over here, so I'm going to start with my layering over here. And I gave my brush a little bit too much of a squeeze there, so I'm going to dab it off, and I'm going to grab a little bit of new ink. And I'm going to go around this pocket, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then I'm going to bring that out here to the edge of my vest. And I actually left, she's got like a little ruffle on this vest. I left that white. I didn't color it in. Right, so I'm going to grab a little bit more, and we're going to go up here and we're going to do the same thing on our shoulder straps. Add a little bit of color up there, and let's go ahead and put a little bit on this side. And pull that down with just our water down here onto the front. A little bit more, that's kind of light. But just a tad bit more. And there she's got a little bitty patch showing right here in between, so I'm going to go ahead and dab just a little bit in there. And then let's pull that down here towards her sleeve. And let's darken up this other side over here. That down. Okay, that looks pretty good for a first cut, so I'm going to let that dry. Let's go down here and we're going to add some to our jeans. So we're going to grab a little bit on our brush, and I'm going to start right here in the seam of her pants. So I'm going to lay down my ink right here in the seam of her pants. She's got a couple little buttons there. I go bring my ink down here around these flowers just a little bit too, and then I'll dab my brush off and come in with just water and pull that ink over here to the other side of her pants. Okay, that looks pretty good for a first coat. So let's go ahead and do the back of her pants leg. So again, I'm going to grab some more of my evergreen bough, and I'm going to apply that to the back. Oops. Bring that up here to the top, trying not to touch the lace there, and then come back with just water and flick that away from that line and into the white space. And I don't want to color that heart, so we're going to go around that. Come down here, and a little bit down here by our pants cuff. Okay, and let's go over here. So this side's had a little bit of a chance to dry. So I'm going to go over to this side, and I'm going to add some to her pants cuff. I'm going to dab a little bit over here, and then dab off, and pull that color into the middle. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the other cuff. I'm going to go around the back side, on this side, and then dab my brush off, and come in with just water and flick that towards the middle. Okay, I think that looks pretty good for a first coat. So let's go up here, and I think her headbands up there, I'm liking how those look, so I'm going to leave those. And I think I'll add just a little bit more to her vest. So I'm going to grab a little bit just down here in the bottom right here. Wipe my brush off and carry that ink out here to the outside. Okay, and I picked up a little bit of ink on my brush, so I'm going to go and use that little bit of ink down here on this pocket, just to give it a light green. But I do want to do the top of the pocket, so I'm going to grab some fresh ink and just dab that up here. We want that to be dark. Okay, let's go up here and go ahead and add a little bit to our straps. And then work that ink down towards the bottom. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm liking that. I'm actually liking how the pants look too, but I'm going to add a little bit more to this cuff right here. Let's pull that out, make it a little bit darker here in the seam. Okay, I think that looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave that. So let's go up here and add a little bit of color to the leaves, the greenery of these flowers. So for that, we're going to use bundled sage. Actually, I think I will switch to my detail brush because you got to get in between all those flowers, and I don't want to have too much ink. Okay, so I've grabbed a little bit of my bundled sage, and I'm just going to go in here and work my brush around in between all these little flower petals. And if your brush gets too wet, like mine's picking up a lot of water, I'm going to go ahead and dab it off. I'll grab fresh ink, and I'll start in a new place. Same thing, grab fresh ink and just work my way around all these flowers. Until I get all the green space filled in. And it's perfect. This even lighter over here since the sun I feel is shining a little bit further lighter over here on this side, so it's great that I've run out of ink and it's just a light green there. Okay, so I'm going to pick up, she's got a couple of little leaves that are poking out, so I'm going to go ahead and fill those in with some of my bundled sage. And here's one. I'm actually going to make a couple of these in here a little bit darker. And I wasn't sure if this one right here was a flower or not, so I'm just going to make it green. It just doesn't look like it belongs in there, but we're going to make it a nice green color there so that it can kind of fade into the back. Okay, so that leaves us with this shirt, and for her shirt I used just a little bit of my weathered wood. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that, and her sleeve. So I'm going to add a little bit of my weathered wood right along the bottom of her sleeve. And then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and we're going to pull that ink up towards the middle. And I got quite a bit there, so I'm going to go ahead, now that I've made it to the other side, I'm going to wipe my brush off again, and then come back and continue wiping up to the top of her sleeve. That way I get rid of some of that ink. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for the inside of her shirt. So let me grab a little bit of ink, and I'm just going to give it a little bit right along this vest lace. And then I'm going to wipe that excess off, and I'm going to use just that little bit of ink I put down to pull across to the other side. That gives it just a little bit of a shadow. Okay, so for now, let's go do, what does that leave us? Oh, the flowers. And for that, I have used picked raspberries. So let me go ahead and grab that. That happens to be in my other palette, because I have been too lazy to redo all the little stickers and move it over to the other one. So we're going to do picked raspberries. So we're going to pick a little bit of that up. And let's start up here with these in her hair, since I know this is dry, because I did that yesterday. Let's just add a little bit of that pretty pink color to each of these little petals. And just continue around adding pink to each one of our little flowers. And she's also got some little balls right in some of the flowers, so I'm just going to go ahead and dab each one of those and make it pink. Okay, and then I'm going to skip down and I'm going to do this flower down here on the ground. So we're going to grab us a little bit of our picked raspberries and just swirl that around on each one of those little petals. I think it's great that it's actually running out of ink as you go around on the petals, and it makes some of them a little bit lighter. And again, she's got some little circles down here. I'm just going to fill those in. And then go up here to the top. So I think I'll actually, just so I don't accidentally put my hand in it, I'm going to start up here at the top flower and work my way down, because never fails, I would end up putting my hand right in the ink that's still wet and dragging it somewhere it doesn't go. Fill that in, and then I wipe my brush off and I get fresh ink for the next flower. Same thing, I've wiped my brush off. We're going to grab fresh ink for the next flower. Just work our way around to all these pretty little flowers. And I'll do these over here in the back so I don't accidentally put my hand in it. And like I said, I'm just messy. And when I color, when I'm coloring my images for the cards, I skip around all over the place when I'm coloring, so that, you know, I do her skin and then I would do her pants, and just depends, so that I'm not touching something that's wet. I color multiple things at once so it can dry in between each layer, and then I go back and add more color to, like, her pants or her hair, but I always skip to a place where I'm not touching something that I just did. Oops, better go down here and get this one. And last but not least, get this cute one right here. And then let's go ahead and fill in some of these little circles that she's got here. And I'm just going to let my ink run out on my brush and do the circles until there's no more. You could each time go get fresh ink so they're really dark. Totally up to you. Okay, that looks really good. So I think I will go up here actually. Now, since it took me so long to do those, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to darken up just a few of these petals. So we have a little bit more contrast. And let's do the center of this one. And I think I'll actually come down here and maybe put a little bit more on a couple of these. It's just totally how I feel at the moment. Sometimes I leave them light, sometimes I darken them up. Sometimes I don't paint them all the way to the end. Okay, I'm liking how those look. Gives them a little bit more contrast there, but her one in her hair over here, I think I'll go add a little bit more, and I'm going to be careful not to put my hand right in the ink on those other flowers, and just darken that one up just a little bit more. That looks much better. Okay, let's go hop down here and do this little heart on her pants. So again, I'm just going to lay my ink down here on the bottom of this heart. And I have quite a bit on my brush still, so I'm going to wipe all that off. And we're going to come in and just smooth that line up towards the top of the little heart. Like that. Alright, so I've given that a couple minutes to dry, and now I'm going to go in for the center of the flowers and add a little bit of mustard seed, or you could also use scattered straw. That's a nice light yellow color. Just going to dab each one of those cute little flowers. My ink ran out, so let me grab a little bit more to get this one up here in her hair. Okay, and that is all colored, but on this one I also did, I added some twinkling H2Os. Okay, so my twinkling H2Os, they come in a little pot, and I've got this idea over at Katarina's Whiff of Joy blog. This is how she stores her twinkling H2Os, and it's perfect because before I had them all just thrown in a drawer, and I never used them because you had to pick through every one until you found the green you wanted. And on this little cheap cutting board I picked up over at Walmart, they're just hot glued down on here, and I have all the green ones, you know, on a tray. They kind of, I guess I started purple over here, but they're all together. And so before I came in to do my video, I actually took my little mini mister and I sprayed my twinkling H2O so it can kind of get wet in there a little bit. And then when I'm all done using it, I don't just put the lid back on, I let it dry, and then later I'll come back and put the lid back on. But I've added just a little bit of water to my twinkling H2Os, and what you do is you just take your water brush, and I kind of put it in the water and pull the ink over here onto the water over here onto the side, because if you pick up a bunch, it's a lot. So you just want to get a little bit. Okay, I had to put my camera back down there so we can be a little bit closer. Okay, so I've picked up a little bit of my twinkling H2Os on the bottom of my brush, and what I did is I just went in here and I still, where I want it to be dark, I still added a little bit of that. I start there and then I just work my brush all the way over to the other side. And if you run out, you just grab a little bit more, go pick up a little bit more of your paint, and then again lay down your brush in the dark area and then pull it into the middle. But I did that to all of my, where I put down my evergreen bough, because sage was pretty close. But it just adds a little bit of sparkle to your painting, some glitter. And if you don't have the twinkling H2Os, sometimes you do, if a lot of people have Perfect Pearls, the powder, you can also take a little bit of that and add a little bit of your evergreen bough distress ink into the powder. Just put a little bit on a piece of acetate and mix it up, and then use that. And I just add a little bit of this all over to all my green. And just added a nice sparkle to all of her clothes. You could also do, if you had different colors, you could do the flowers, her hair. It'd be totally up to you. But that added a nice, and I know you can't see it on there, but when you can see it in person, it's got a nice little shimmery glimmer to her clothes. Oops. So that is our watercoloring kit called Ruby, and look, I've managed to put my finger in the pink paint, and I've got a little bit of color right there, so I'm gonna have to try to erase that. But doesn't she look cute? And here's the finished card. And if you'd like to see if this card is still available, head over to the store, and there's a link down in the description box. Just type Ruby into the search bar at the top of the store and see if it pops up. If not, check out the other kits while you're over there. And thanks for joining me today. Have a great day. Bye.